And so your kids not working?
We're ready.
I've tried several. Not completely. No, we'll get you back up. Thank you.
All right, so let's go ahead and get our work session started for this evening. Thanks to those of you who have joined us in person, and hopefully we have some people online. So thank you for your involvement in the city. We're going to start tonight our work session of April Fool's Day of 2025 by hearing from Councilmember Pulver, who is going to give us an invitation, a thought, hope, and then lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Councilmember Pulver.
Just do an invocation for tonight. That's all right. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this wonderful day and all the moisture we're getting. And Lord, we ask thee to guide us in our decisions tonight, that we can make the best decisions for the city and for the citizens, and that we can understand each other and make correct budgeting choices when it comes to direction for the staff. And I say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilmember Pulver, for doing that. Appreciate it. I'd like to excuse Councilmember Watson and Councilmember Dowpaz tonight, who are celebrating spring break with their families out of town. So
Hopefully not in snow.
I think they're both in places where there's not much snow. And only one place this time. We'd like to excuse them. Even though we don't have any decision making tonight, do we have any conflict of interest that anyone would like to disclose this evening pertaining to our discussion? I see none, so I'll assume there are none. We'll move on now to our agenda, and if anyone would like to make public comments, now would be the time. Anyone online, John, if you would watch, and anyone here, just follow our standard rules in regards to public comments. If any of you have any questions on that, I'd be happy to answer it. Otherwise, we'll proceed with public comment.
Do you have one online?
Okay, hear from Susan Kilborn.
Hi, Susan Kilborn, North Ogden citizen. There will be public comments after your discussion.
Correct.
Okay, I will reserve my comments after I hear what y'all are going to talk about. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Anyone else here that would like to comment at this time? Okay, I think Susan's the only one online, so we'll proceed along. And item number 3 on our agenda, which is a discussion on the relocation of the 2020 Share Day Parade route to consider Washington Boulevard. And then also a policy for the parade share placement along the designated route, wherever that may be. John, did you want to chime in on that discussion?
Well, so we had originally talked about the parade being on 3100. That was a recommendation from the police department. And then they pivoted and said, you know what, we can make Washington work. In fact, they came up with some really good ideas. And so we told the council at the last council meeting, hey, we're going to do it on Washington. That's a recommendation from the police. And it was brought up by a council member that they wanted it to be on the agenda so that people, if they wanted the legislative history, they could see it. And so the question is, what route are we taking? What's the plan? So either route works. I think the recommendation from Public Works is Washington.
Yeah.
And police, Washington works. There have been some comments about doing it on 3100. It's one of those things that the council, I'm going to say, likes to weigh in on every year as we've kind of been sorting through this. So if you have a strong preference, But right now, the staff is leaning to Washington, just to keep with the way it's been done in the past now that we've got the public safety things resolved.
We've always done it, no?
No, it's not how we've always done it.
Whatever the council decides, we probably ought to stick with something unless this debate back and forth, I think confuses the citizens. I think both places work. Sure, there's pros and cons of each, so. I wasn't at the last meeting, so I don't know if there was a vote taken to switch it or. Well, last time I left, it was 3,100. It's frankly, not that it matters, but I really like because it's more of a hometown type parade. I think, it's a little bit safer because the kids, when they're trying to throw candy after the split, I think there was a solution, though, maybe address with that, but what do you want to do, council? Whatever you decide, though, we got to try to maybe stick with it. Unless there's some major catastrophe that causes this. Councilmember Colbert?
So the flyover might be easier in Washington. That's the only thing I would think of why there'd be a difference between the two. I mean, I did like 3,100. I mean, it just, like you said, it's easier to, but I know the citizens tend to like Washington better. I'm not sure the reason why. I mean, you get a split on that, so that's the only downside. Whatever you pick, you're gonna have these people mad. So
Yeah, it's a no-win situation.
yeah, for sure. So I think it's whatever is easiest for us as, as police and also public works to figure out how to funnel people, to and from safely. At the same time, how do we direct people to what the next event is, after the parade? So.
Maybe share just a little context on the discussion Dave and I had.
Sure.
I think as I remember our conversation, part of the 3,100 issue was the turning of the vehicles in the parade, right? It was a little tight there.
Yeah.
And then the funneling of people in and out of that area. Whereas our concern with Washington was blocking the roads. And we've solved that problem with the plows. And so we thought it'd be easier to funnel people in for safety. And then we wouldn't have to worry about those that were longer floats or longer vehicles that were involved in the parade. That wouldn't be so tight. Those were the two concerns.
And I can talk about some of the security. So the main security stuff that was on Washington that were some of the issues were the major roads, right? 2,700. How do we make sure that we have a safe, area there? So what we've talked about is we are going to take snowplow trucks. We're going to block it basically at O'Reilly's. On this side of the street, it'll be near the Smith's exit or the entrance over here. We'll block that with some snowplow trucks. 2550, we'll do it near the fire station. And then the other major thing that we had last year that was there's two more. One was the drop-off zone. What was happening is we were having floats enter at 2,800 in Washington, or 2,850 in Washington, where the light is now at Alberta there. But there was a lot of people dropping off their families there. So kids were getting out, trying to get down to their floats while there was a lot of vehicles, traffic there, right? So we moved the drop-off zone over to 450, right at 2,700, right by the park there. We're going to close that little piece of road between Washington and 450 on 2,700. We'll close that down so that is it's only open for foot traffic for pedestrians to get to the floats. All of that will be closed down now. And then the other big one from a police standpoint, and I completely understand because I was down there and part of it, that we were ending the parade at 1,700. But the problem was we were closing the road right there at the south end of that intersection. And so what was happening was you had a bunch of cars piling up very close, plus you were ending the parade and people were wanting to go in a million different directions. And so what we did is we had taken the end of the parade and ended at basically Kurt's Plaza, so 1875 Big O right there. We're going to end it there so that if if people need to get, if there's kids on, like if it's the cheerleading group and different things where we have to get kids off of floats, we'll have that buffer from 1900 down to 1700. We'll have that area to be able to offload people. But if they're not and they're just going to leave, then we'll make them exit either east or west on 1900 there and get them to just disperse some of that traffic. And so those were some of the major concerns. I think we worked through most of those, but again, it's one of those things, we can make either one work. If it is 3100, we will again make that work. We'll figure it out. And if it's Washington, I think we've kind of addressed all of our concerns there, and I think we can do that too. So we have put in for the UDOT permit already, just because we needed to get that ball rolling. So if we do pivot and go to 3100, we can pull that permit. We did put the flyover. You mentioned the flyover. It's one of those things that just so everybody knows is we've done all the paperwork. Basically, we will be on the route if they do it, but there's a very good chance with all the federal cuts that there's a chance that nobody gets flyover. So if they do end up having a flyover, we'll be part of it. If they don't, then we won't.
The original comment about safety came from Lieutenant Boyette,
Mm-hmm.
who was down there talking with the people, happened to live with one of them. But other people talking about the kids parade, and I can remember we're trying to get the kids lined up and there's still cars coming through. And I think, we ought to consider the safety of those kids too. Because, they start showing up early, they're getting in, I think, the parking lot that In-N-Out Healthcare. And, so if it is on Washington Boulevard, we need to make sure that we cut that traffic off and block it off so the kids are safe, because I remember cars still coming through when the kids were trying to line up for the parade.
I think we're going to have a more dynamic plan for the full shutdown. We've already been speaking with Justin, and the lifeguards will not be, the pool won't be open at that time the parade is. So I think we're going to utilize a lot of the lifeguards to help us get roads closed. So either one, we're going to be a lot better as far as a safety from that aspect. We'll be in good shape either one. So.
I'm in favor of Washington, so. Okay. That's number 4.
Flip a coin. Yeah. I'm good either way.
I'm good either way. Staff recommends Washington. That's
Okay,
great to
so be
me.
it. Washington is the place.
If you need a fire truck to block it, we can do that too.
No, that means you get out of the parade.
And the second part of the conversation is chairs. And you saw my staff report. It's not a glowing recommendation that we pick up chairs. The hard thing with chairs is over the years, and Dave has typically been there every morning, so you can lean on him, but it seems like we just keep having more and more of an escalation of anger and conflict in that process. To the point where I think it was 10 years ago, we started being escorted by a police officer. And then I think I put in my thing, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, that officer had to get out of the vehicle and confront a chair sitter to get them to stop being as aggressive with our employees. So our recommendation is that we not do it because it causes so much conflict in the morning and it takes away some resources for other activities that day. But if the council would like to, I would ask that 2 of you volunteer to help so that you can see it and then maybe have a better understanding for next year. Because I think the recommendation from staff is going to be that we just tell people, we ask you to not put it out until this time frame. And then they'll put it out early and Facebook will blow up about it. And there's not going to be much you can do. So.
And from the staff's perspective, it's just, there is so many people down there that it becomes a little overwhelming for my staff, the police, and you just, and it just sucks because you watch this, you literally are going and picking up chairs and then you've got 20 people standing on the sidewalk. And the second that we pick up these people's chairs, and we're a half a block away. Now they're replacing those chairs with their own chairs and now taking their spots, and it's just. It just looks like a wave down, like as we go, you just see all these people pull back their stuff. And then the second that we get past them, they just replace their stuff with the people that we took. And so it's kind of tough to deal with that way, but again, do what you guys ask us to.
Remind me again, last year, what did we say? We said.
We didn't say anything.
Last year we
The
said.
parade people did.
Great people.
Remember, that's what the controversy we had.
Mm,
City kind of indicated one thing and the parade people, and it just created so whatever you decide, you need to communicate very clearly.
Before then, what have we done? 6 o'clock or something.
when it was on 3100 4 years ago or 3 years ago, we didn't do any rules because it was people's front yards and not a lot of people set chairs out. Out here where it's this commercial property, they feel a little more liberty. And then I think the year before that on Washington, that was I think the last year we actually picked them up. So the last couple of years, we've had the policy they shouldn't, but we haven't actually picked chairs up.
But you should have a policy then, it's not gonna enforce it, right?
Correct.
You look at people out there setting up chairs days before,
Hmm.
burning but no matter, you can't set a time because you can't enforce it.
The blankets are a big issue. They'll burn the grass. The other thing we've seen is people will drive stakes into the ground and caution tape it. And we've had them hit, sprinkler lines.
Could we put out something that says if you damage any commercial property, you're liable? I don't know. Something like that, at least to scare them a little. Not that we're-
Some businesses have actually timed their sprinklers
To go on.
to go off. So, there have been some of those that have been done. But I think the mayor's right. Whatever we decide, we need to make it really clear. There are lots of other cities that have bans on putting chairs out. And no one gathers up the chairs. They just say, hey, you're not supposed to. And people typically, well, a good majority of people respect it. The other issue that we have, which is when the parade starts, everyone who's standing behind the chairs moves in front of the chairs because the road's so wide. And so the people in the chairs get angry that they lost their front row seat. So it's I don't know. Ryan's probably been in the parade more than anybody else, having grown up here. Been to the parade?
Been
in
to
it?
the parade.
Yeah.
I've been one, no, I've never walked in front of anybody sitting.
So,
It's a no-win. There's no good answer. I'm of the opinion we just don't pick them up. We just. Whether you say put them out the 24 or the day before, but
Careful about ruining people's stuff, because if it's not your property, I mean, something like that.
usually you don't really ruin people's property till after the fact.
I know, but driving stakes or leaving, yeah, it's true. But at least you can give a polite warning or something. These make people pause, if that's anything else.
Remind them of respect.
Yeah, that's basically maybe what you do. Say respect somewhere in there.
How often do we see, chairs popping up on, like this week, this year would be Thursday, have we seen that many people coming that early, putting chairs up?
The night before and then.
Even the day before.
Yeah,
We-
you'll see it the morning before.
I was gonna say, I think that the earliest we've seen is about 48 hours is kind of when people start throwing them out. And that's when Facebook starts.
Yeah.
Getting
And
excited.
all it takes is one. Once one person puts their stuff out, it's like, oh, well, I better go get mine now.
So I should put a chair out like Monday.
Yes, please don't.
Just one chair.
There are some families who they sit in the same spot every year and they, and
So they were on Washington, even though we had a 3100.
yeah, that's true. But the other thing that we typically, if there's someone sitting in the chair, we don't pick them up. So if there's someone that's accountable for the group of chairs that's there,
So they sleep in their chair, they're good.
but we have families that starting at about 4 or 5 a.m. they'll have people rotating through who's watching their spot. So
So if we did just like a first come, first served, but not until after 5 o'clock Friday night.
But what are you gonna do if they come out at 4:30?
Yeah. I wouldn't,
I don't know.
I wouldn't give it a date
Oh, you
or
know,
time. Stay, be respectful, putting out your chairs before the parade, something, liability, yada, yada.
I mean, I think it's safe to assume that,
I don't know if it's successful historically.
it's safe to assume, if you said 24 hours and people start, most people put their stuff out on Thursday, you'll have a few on Wednesday and you'll have a couple on Tuesday. Like, that's just the reality of it. And some of
On
them,
Wednesday, you're gonna pick them up? No,
I don't want to, so it's no.
the whole reason you're not picking them up because you don't wanna put city employees in danger, so. Apparently, they can set them up tomorrow, I guess, if they want. What's the downside? Other people complaining. They're gonna complain either way.
And maybe remind them that we don't have, we're not responsible as a city for their stuff when it gets taken. That's a deterrent.
I think we gotta have the fire department hold down the sidewalk so they're clean for the parade. You can do that. Do that.
well, we take the water truck down and we just hose the whole.
Do it with the sewer truck.
If I'm understanding, the whole concern here is the safety of city employees, is that correct?
Yes,
So no matter what time you set, if you believe that's the case, that, you know, we're putting our employees at risk. And basically, you have no, they just set them out and you wave as you go by. And I agree, I mean, I don't want our folks put at risk if, I mean, people are, you know, pushing back and you see some crazy things going on in the world today. What do you want to do, council? Councilmember Barker, what would you like to do?
I guess let's say do nothing, because if, I mean, if we're not getting forced nothing, then don't. Yeah, put out your chairs whenever you want.
I mean, do you want us to put out a post that encourages them
Yeah,
not to?
24 hours, I'd say.
We're gonna encourage you to not put them out till 24 hours, but
Or the day before is fine, yeah.
I mean, it won't go anywhere.
Right, but like I said, if you have a landscaping crew come through Maverick or wherever and they
Mhm.
clean them up,
That's because people are mowing the lawns and stuff, so
Yeah.
it's not like you're.
right?
I like my idea of cleaning the sidewalks.
Yeah.
With the fire department holding them down.
I like the sewer truck better.
Yeah, what do you wanna do?
Leaf truck.
First
That-
come, first
Yeah.
served. Set them up whenever they like. Yep, set them up whenever they want. What would you like to do, Councilman? Although you're already outvoted, but it doesn't matter, but.
Well, I would at least put out a notice saying, be respectful of other people's property. And, that your personal property, once you put it out there, is at risk. You can say those two things and be done with it. Don't even give the time frame.
Okay. Does that answer your question, John?
yep,
Sounds like, there's no enforcement, no policy.
Put it out at your own risk.
The Wild Wild West out there this year for parade. Yeah.
Okay. All right, what's next, Mr. Carl?
Can only get better.
so that's everything I think on Cherry Days, unless council has any questions they'd like to ask or any updated information you need.
We have a list of who's been John Marshall for the history of the city.
We do somewhere, cause we put it together 3 years ago when we ran it down 2,600 and we had as many of it in it as we could, or families. So I think we've got a history there. But it's on the Parks and Rec drive and I haven't looked for it.
Well, the recorder's giving me some pressure to get that.
Come on, Mayor.
I think she said if you don't pick someone that she's gonna do it, so.
Oh,
Oh, I thought it
Fine
was
with
that he was
that,
gonna
too.
do it.
Mm,
I've been practicing my wave and everything.
I've got some, you know, we've had 3 suggestions.
Because
So
I'd like to
we
ride
do
that
have some
parade too.
choices.
Yes.
I just need to know
Ryan's
who's been, so we don't duplicate one of the suggestions that, may have already been, I don't know.
Okay.
Did you get that,
Yeah, we will find it.
So did we decide on fireworks? Where it's gonna be?
It'll be up at the amphitheater.
Okay.
And there will be music and kids events and fireworks. And we looked at incorporating a drone show, but on the 4th of July, it triples the price.
Just triples? Okay.
Yeah, so we said, probably not. So it would be incorporated with the fireworks.
we're gonna
You
have
could
the
have two
most
drones.
incredible fireworks show in Weaver County. Is that what you're saying, John?
On the 4th, and it's basically, we just counted the number of shells that Pleasant View is shooting off, and we're shooting one more. Just kidding.
But no, you're not.
Well, but we haven't,
Not kidding.
we've got a good vendor, someone who's done that for us in the past, and Ryan, his fire marshal is gonna work with the city in helping to establish the right launch location and shell size and stuff, so we can make it work. We're heavily exploring the option of having a smaller shell closer to the group, to the amphitheater, as opposed to a big shell shot from Wadman as an example. Just because of the feedback with the launching at North Ogden Park, that people liked being close.
Let's have a big show right by the amphitheater.
What's the distance? Is it 100 feet for every inch of shell? You have to be away from the crowd
And from buildings.
and from buildings.
We'll do it up on the hill then, right?
Huh?
Mostly with
Yeah, and dry fields,
Yeah.
dry grass.
So Wadman is where we did our last really big shell show from, and you can see it all over the city. The smaller show we did the last 2 years at North Ogden Park used 1.5 to 2 inch shells.
3
Which
inches.
was
Up to 3.
pretty good, I thought.
If
That'd
you're at
be
the
cool to
park.
see him coming right over the. You could.
Yeah.
I guess the fire marshal, Mr. Enforcer down there.
There's a dry field right there. That's not alfalfa, but it's dry.
So why can't we do it at Weaver High then?
We could,
We have to rent the school.
but you can't,
Yeah.
and you can't get on the football field anymore.
Yeah, that's what I figured, but
We don't care if people are getting injured on the field, but we can't damage the field.
We had a previous mayor that said we should shoot him off in North Ogden.
When did it switch over? 2008,
No, like 11 or
11? So.
Yeah.
Well, let's make it a real show if we're gonna have one.
Yeah. I was gonna,
No, the vendor that we're talking with, they came in with a really good budget, and so we started, as soon as we knew the drones were out, we started saying, well, what if we do a larger,
Mhm.
more shells? 3 finales.
I wanna confiscate some from over there and bring them over here.
So,
We'll make it good.
And so we're doing 4th of
Yeah.
July fireworks.
and any other questions? Just to reiterate, we're doing the car show on Monday, the luau on Tuesday, the flick and float on Wednesday, nothing on Thursday, well, the rodeo. But nothing late at night. There's another activity in the city that's late at night that we are not affiliated with. And then Friday we'll do all the traditional parade, breakfast, sunrise ceremony, potentially a cannon. I don't know if that's a tradition or not.
It's a big.
A big boom.
It's a big boom.
We haven't done it the last, I don't know how many years, 3 or 4 years, but
And then and that'll be at the main park, and then mid-afternoon we'll shift over to the amphitheater and finish out the rest of the day there. So with a concert, we got some bands getting booked, and a ping pong ball drop, and some kids games and food and fun. And then Saturday morning cleanup. So we'll need some help on Saturday morning, but that's all part of the volunteer stuff we're gathering. And of course, by volunteers, you, council, are all involved in that, so.
We have a budget, John.
We do.
What is that? Did we miss that? Is that been shared with the council?
So we're trying to stick with the traditional budget of right around $50,000. So we have a tentative budget that I was gonna present as part of the marketing stuff next week.
Okay.
However, we don't have anything approved because you haven't approved a budget yet, so. It'd be good to know if you feel like the $50,000 range is good, because that's within the tentative budget.
Well, out of pocket of the city.
The
25, but
25,
we're planning on raising like 40, right?
well, I gave Morgan with the contract, the expectation is that she bring in 30 is my minimum goal for her. And that would put us at $55,000 with about 25 coming from the city. But if we get more, then we'll be thrilled, and it'll just reduce the city's out-of-pocket expense for it.
Sounds good.
So yeah. Anything else on Cherry Days council has questions about?
no, but I foresee that we need more parking at Burger Park, but. Gotta fix that. I already got yelled at before I got here. Said Burger Park, there's gonna be nowhere to park.
Well, and we've we've talked about, just so the council's aware, that from the safety perspective, as we work with the fire department and the police, there's a good chance we'll at least, caution tape off one side of the road. So cars will only be parked on one side, with a towing enforcement. And we'll just work with the residents so they have clear expectations, and then the people who are coming who don't live in the area it'd be very clear that they're not allowed to park there. So,
Where will they park?
Wadman, surrounding streets, they can park on the park side. It'll be like most of the events we do up there where there's just not quite enough parking.
The church doesn't allow us to use that. Can we get permission to use the church?
They won't give us permission. They have in the past said if it's a community event, then they won't lock the gates, but they're not giving people permission, if that makes sense. So, but that's something that, if someone had a relationship with the leadership there, they could talk to them and see. But in the past, they've kind of said, no, we're not interested in giving official permission. And that's a fairly standard thing for a lot of those nonprofit organizations. We used to do a volleyball tournament over here at the Red Church on 2600. And we don't do that anymore because of the liability risks.
On Tuesday with the luau, which is a lot of people. They'll probably be having church activities. That's their.
Yeah, and
So they're not gonna want anybody parking in the parking lot most likely.
yeah, we'll want to make it really clear that it'd be good to maybe get some signs up saying no event parking.
Huh?
That's the unit L word, so they only do that one day. Is there a regular word there too? Okay.
It's kind of a rowdy word, but.
It is.
There is one there.
Oh, that's right. Sorry. Yeah, forgot the word for
But
that.
the council member Folder's point, this needs to get on the agenda, council. You need to decide what's gonna go on in Barton Park. And we're gonna get serious about it. Use some of the money we've got in the capital projects budget, see if we can get some grants to help. So yeah, we need to. John has, suggested, I think, a couple things in regards to impact fees that could help, but nothing will happen without a plan.
Yep.
Money wise, I mean, plan's been approved, few tweaks, but, the issue is, the money.
And we'll touch on that as we go into the budget discussion and talk about our 5-year plan. Because now that we've kind of got that, 50,000 foot view of the plan, that we're moving forward with design and hopefully some construction in the next 5 years is kind of the goal. So, but Dave's got all the details on it.
So much.
So much.
So that's everything Cherry Days that I've got.
Okay. Lead us about the budget, John, what would you like to have
Okay,
on
so
the budget?
this is the kind of initial kickoff of the actual budget process. Just so council's aware, there's some critical dates that are coming up. The 13th of May is when we pass the tentative budget. That doesn't implement anything. It just gives a final version that's balanced that the residents can review and bounce ideas back and forth off of. And then the final budget will be approved, has to be approved before June 26th, I believe, or 23rd. But we have a meeting before that. The goal is to have it just on that first council meeting and get it approved. Assuming we're not doing a property tax increase. As the budget is now, it doesn't include that. One other thing that's important to note is that the Citizens Budget Committee has been underway and had 3 meetings now. They will, anytime we're talking about the budget, we're going to ask them to participate because the goal is that as the council talks about, so next week we'll be talking about parks and public works stuff. So they'll provide some information to the council on their recommendations. And then it'll just be part of the process through April to kind of do the back and forth, talk about the nuances, talk about some of the scary things, let's talk about all the scary things, and then talk about some of the good things, the fun things. The budget's always fun. So I have created a presentation to kind of guide us through the process. And we'll see if it works. This is my April Fool's joke.
Mother Nature's was this morning.
Are you sharing this?
I am not sharing this. Thank you for catching that, because I need to. Okay. The first thing is, in this meeting is typically when we talk about revenues. This is the current projected revenue in this year's budget, or for the budget we're planning, which is fiscal year 26. The number below, the 11,429, that is the budget or the revenue projection for this current year that we are operating under. And so with that, we're predicting about $430,000 more in additional revenue. The pie chart on the right shows you where the majority of that money comes from. 80% of it is general tax, which is your property tax, your sales tax, and your utility franchise taxes. No, sorry, not franchise taxes. And then then the other, I guess it doesn't, but then the intergovernmental is the other big kind of chunk. But essentially 90% of the money in a lot of ways just comes in large swaths once a year. The sales tax does come in every month, 2 months late, but that's kind of the expectation. This breaks down those general taxes between property tax, which is the 32% number, sales tax, which is the 52% number, and then the others. So motor vehicle tax, you can see, is 2%. It's not a big deal. But there's...
Is that the gas tax or is that something else?
That is the gas tax.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where's that extra 450,000 come from?
So it's an increase across all of these funds. So like in general taxes, I typed that number in wrong. But it's a slight increase. Oh, sorry. Most of it's an increase in general taxes, Mayor, to your question. The majority of the things that are like licenses and permits, fees and other things right now are being projected to hold flat, partly because of some of the trends we're seeing. On general taxes, for example, our property tax revenue is only up 2.44% over the 4.8 million that we've budgeted. And typically we don't like to go very aggressive on sales tax. And so what is planned in this budget is currently a 3.5% increase over the 4.8, and the 4.8 is how much we collected in fiscal year 24. So we've always been fairly conservative on sales tax. Most of these numbers are recommendations from Jamie, our previous finance director, as she helped put the budget together. But I've got a slide further down that kind of summarizes some of these key points. In particular, sales tax, the increase in property tax that would be based on growth in buildings, not on a tax rate increase, and then the increases or the conversation about building permits and fees that we're seeing there. What I try to do on each of these slides is identify where this money goes as well. So like this general taxes, most of this money goes to fund the departments that don't operate on any sort of a utility or fee or revenue. So a good example of that would be parks, police, and most of the departments in this building. Granted, some of the departments in this building are subsidized with money out of the utility accounts to pay, like for my time in Ryan's and Katie's. Yeah, that admin transfer. But that's the majority of it of these taxes and these general things are used to pay for parks and police and admin. License and permits. This is money typically coming out of building, planning, and business licenses. So we get about 345,000 from those, or that's the projected. We are on the low end right now 300,000 of that is the 87% that's building permits. So the other 45 is your planning and your business licenses. This intergovernmental revenue, the majority of this is B&C road funds. That comes from the gas tax. And then there's some coming from Pleasant View for the Northview Senior Center, the state liquor allotment and the highway safety grant and the victims advocate grants and Weber School District are all revenues that go into the police department to help pay for either extra shifts for DUI or to help with our school resource officer in the contract that we have with the school district there. And then the majority of the money for Class C gets spent on roads and the operation of the road department. So that covers everything from the time that we have Bowen and others working there, snow plowing and resurfacing and repaving. So a good chunk of that 86,000 ends up getting transferred into capital projects and then used on resurfacing projects. Charges for services. So these are where you get some of those recreation fees, the park rental fees, plan check and zoning subdivision fees show up here as opposed to in the other area, the business licenses, just because of the way we categorize it. But the majority of this money is coming in as a part of plan check fees. So that 49% number is $120,000 in plan check fees for reviewing building permits. And then the recreation fees is the next largest, the 28%. That's about $30,000. Fines and forfeitures, this is courts and youth court. This money is typically spent on the court and youth court. Our court operates at about a break-even point. Lately, it's been dropping a little, in the sense that since COVID, it's slowly stopped. We've had not less tickets, but less money coming in. And because of that, we used to have 2 part-timers and a full-timer, and now we're down to 1 part-timer and a full-timer in that department, as a result of the caseload. So miscellaneous revenue, this is just kind of a catch-all. And so it's not a lot of money, $20,000. The pie looks really big, but about half of that, I think, is actually police report money. There's about $10,000 that gets paid to get police reports by people who are interested in what happened with their case. Interest income, it all comes from interest. This is where the PTIF and the other funds we have, that it's general fund money. This is where the revenue shows up, and it gets expensed out, and typically either goes to general government expenses, or you could maybe argue that this is the money that gets transferred into capital projects. Contributions, 109,000. Last year it was 197, but that's because we had a fund balance in B&C road funds that we transferred in, and so it made it the way that the accountant or that Jamie had it set up. It made it look like it was a contribution from an outside agency, but it actually was just from ourselves. And then there's quite a bit of donations that we come in that are just kind of random donations from residents for bulletproof vests or just all sorts of things. So here's the discussion points and maybe where we can pause and talk a little bit about. So for sales tax, we are currently at 2.44% over what we budgeted. As I mentioned, we budgeted 4.8 million, and the current budget is 4,952, which is a 3.16% increase. That's something that, in my opinion, the council should be involved in making the decision on what are the revenues. And we don't have to do it tonight, but it's something, this meeting is kind of meant to be that kickoff, even though I know you've been stewing and all thinking about this, but this is where in my opinion, the revenue discussion is almost more important than the expense discussion, because I think the mayor always says, how do you pay for expenses? Out of revenues. And so if you're not comfortable with the revenue numbers, meaning if we're not comfortable with a 3.16% increase in sales tax because of trends we're seeing, then we need to dial that back and just have that conversation. The other thing that's been a little troubling is building permits. Currently, through 3 quarters, we've only brought in 63% of the money that we expected. It's already kind of a low estimate between the building permits and the plan check fees. We anticipate, about $420,000 for the current year. That's the same budget we're pushing forward to the next year. Typically, spring is quicker and we see a lot more permits come in. However, there's no guarantee. Interest rates have more to do with building permit numbers than probably anything else. So that's another revenue that we need to talk about. The growth in property tax from 2.9 to 3.1, roughly $170,000 is all based on new structures, not on an increased property tax budget. So an increased rate. So this is things like the Mountain America and that 5 block of commercial coming online, things like that are going to start triggering an increase in property tax revenue, plus all the homes that are coming online. I did the math, and if every new house paid an average of $500,000 in property tax, this would be about 330 homes. But we do have quite a bit of commercial space coming in. Unfortunately, the 2 that are going to be online in time for the tax rolls are not sales tax generating. So we got the 2 banks that are going up, Mountain America and the Bank of America.
I think that number's been under $75,000 the last couple of years in growth. Just pointing it out, that's almost 2.5 times.
Yeah. And I haven't messed with the revenue numbers at all from what Jamie put in, and I didn't talk it over with her prior to her putting it together. And so when I ran that and saw the 333 homes, that felt a little high to me. Just because we're not doing that many permits a year. We're down about 120 to 130 homes is about what we've been doing recently. Or units is probably a better way to say it, because multifamily we kind of count into that mix as well. The other thing, and this is a teaser, the transportation fee. We will give you a much more detailed discussion about that at the May work session when Bowen and Dave make their presentation. I should say Bowen and Dave and I. But I will tell you the minimum recommendation that I'm going to be making to the council is that it's a $10 a month fee because of the amount of work we have to be done. The reality is pretty close to 50% of our roads have less than 10 years of life left in them. And there's a critical amount of roads in between the 5 and 10 years that are salvageable, meaning that we can fix them before they need a complete rebuild. But there's 10% of our roads that are under that 5 years of life left that will need complete rebuilds or the very expensive work done. So
how much is that?
Total, if we were to take all our roads and bring it up to 20-year life tomorrow, it's $107 million.
10% of that. Like 10 million?
Yep. So so that's just something to think about, because the other thing that I think the city needs to be sensitive to is that you have this tension between what needs to happen in transportation utility fees, what needs to happen in utility fees, and what needs to happen potentially in property tax. And that's just a modifier based on those expenses. We've asked all the departments to hold their budgets. And so hopefully in the next 2 meetings, as we talk through those yellow sheets a little bit, you'll see that we tried to do that as much as we could. I'm gonna pick on Bryce just because he had something that's out of his control, so it's not really picking on him. But we are trying to rotate our servers regularly. Servers have gone up 25%. And you could, at least 25%, you could maybe guess why. Because those parts come from China and there's a tariff on them now. So he can't get what he had originally thought he was going to be able to get. And so there's just some tweaks that are going to have to come in. But I think this year the council's going to have to make some hard decisions. And then
How many months have we had sales tax increase on this year?
we had 2.
We had a slight one, but the whole increase was that.
We had a big one that was 20% in
The
December.
rest of them flat to down, right?
Yeah, well, I think like August or September was up a little bit, but nothing like, and the others have been flatter down, the mayor's point. And so, and I really would like to get the council's feelings on each of these, maybe not the last one, because we'll talk about it a lot in May, but just what's your level of comfortability with sales tax going up 3%? Yeah.
One was negligible, right?
Yeah,
One
last month
12,
was like,
one was 20. The rest were, if you do percent, oh no, that's year to year. No, that's right.
That's right.
yeah.
You've had 2.
But that's a big factor. Sales tax accounts for not 50%, but pretty close to 50% of our general fund budget. And so it's a big deal. If you get sales tax wrong, then it's a problem. The worst we've seen in our history on sales tax was a decrease of 20% year to year. And that was during 2008. And then it slowly came back. I think we were back up the 20% 2 years later. So it came back on, but that first 2 years we were down 20%. And then I think we didn't rebound that 20% back. If that makes sense, until the following year. So, we saw a lot of growth in that time from 2011 on to now. And then it's kind of it stagnated last year a little bit and then stagnated, so far this year. So, it's hard to know what to do. And this is why you all get paid the big bucks, because you get to decide what you're comfortable with. So current,
I mean,
go ahead.
sorry, well, I interrupted you, but I mean, that's kind of what we did last year though, was 150, wasn't it? We added to it from the year before. What's that?
No, we raised it a little.
We raised it. You raised it technically. But
Yeah,
I thought it was 100.
fiscal year 2025 budget is 4.8 million.
Right.
Actual collections last year were 4,808,000.
Right, but beforehand, the budget for 2024 was 150 last year.
I'll pull it up.
And we didn't budget an increase over the prior year this year, I think.
Yeah, we did.
Well, our reports must suck then.
What was actually in the-
in front of me, it says year-to-date collected 4,808,156.
What we budgeted.
But the previous year, we only budgeted 4 point something.
Yeah, but we
So
held-
we collected more than, but yeah.
But we held it flat, right? About
4650 is what we budgeted for 23 to 24. So we went 150 above that to 4.8.
Yeah, I'm just reading.
Actual collected, I agree with you, is higher. So I feel confident that 150 higher than what we collected. 4.8,
And
right?
I think it's important to note that, you're not voting anything tonight,
Right.
but
We're sorry.
we do need some guidance, because this is a major factor in what the city's gonna do as we start looking at our top priorities, right? Because, in fact, maybe while you're discussing, I realized the other day we didn't erase our board from October. So
You got it.
it's probably permanently ingrained in it now, but I'm like Vanna White up here. But these are our priorities up here on the left, and this is what we're gonna have to balance everything against. is those four priorities that are usually a subset of all that other stuff, but sales tax is a big issue. Because if it stays flat, then there's $150,000 that we need to take out of the budget.
One thing I'll steal thunder, but we were talking about is from year to year, we don't know the final until two months after the fiscal year. We don't know that the sales tax, what it's even gonna be for this year until August, right?
Correct.
So I guess my point is that, all we can do is look back 2 years ago and figure out year to year, fiscal year to year, how we're gonna do this. And I guess the question is, if we've been over, so we didn't spend as much, we did well on expenses, but yet our revenues were higher for that fiscal year, and it just gets squirreled away. It doesn't necessarily get accounting. Accounting doesn't say, hey, you saved 150 grand, just for example.
Yeah.
It doesn't say that. It just, nobody knows that, hey, we held our expenses, but yet we got more revenue for the fiscal year 23. And so I guess the question is, should we publicize that, number one? Number two is, can we, if that's even a thought, or legal, I think it's legal, is to use that for the following year. Of course, that would be 2 years. Because we'd be budgeting for, if you know what it is in 23, you'd be budgeting for 26, 25, whatever.
Yeah, what we've historically done is we kind of have that goal for the fund balance.
Right.
And we try not to go over that. Although, usually we kind of end up between the 25 and 30. And then last year we do a capital. So we typically have budgeted a capital improvement transfer so that we can scrape off enough money so we don't go over the 35% we're maxed at, and we move it into capital projects funds, and that's where we squirrel it away. And then typically we then do use that money for capital projects the next year. I mean, if it's a last in, first out type of situation,
But I guess what my point is that if for 1 year, we don't want to raise taxes for whatever reason, probably because it's not good. And we did save 150 from whatever fiscal year that was. Can we justify using that quote, and I put that in air quotes, surplus to balance the budget for whatever fiscal year we're in?
I suggested that last year, actually. But we didn't raise sales tax as high as we did because we had excess revenues from the prior year.
I swear I would have remembered that, but.
Well, it's on record. I said, you don't have to increase property taxes that much. And the council said, big deal, we're increasing property taxes whatever we want. Does anybody here remember that discussion?
Yes, because I was not there and I watched it.
Did I say that? We talked about that.
but
Yeah,
And this-
that's an August meeting.
That was the exact reason, is because we had an excess from the previous year that
Why did I get that now?
too much went into, we had more go into capital projects than we
Should have said it
budgeted.
louder, maybe. I don't know.
and this is one of those topics that is always a big conversation, is how much money do you need in the quote unquote rainy day fund? Because that's where the money ends up. If we don't use it, it either goes there, or it goes to capital. And then the idea is the council can use that money in the future for something if they want to, but they don't have to.
And John, I'm on a little problem here of we can use it legally, we can use fund
Okay,
balance.
but-
But here's the problem. We have got so many things that are unfunded in this city. We got 30 acres of parks in there. We got $100 million of roads. And why would we, wanna not fund those things? And how it's funded is exactly what you just said. We budgeted for that because we started looking long-term for, how we're gonna fund these projects. And that's the only way you're gonna fund Barker Park. And it's the only way you're gonna fund roads. But you can, Councilmember Pulver, to your point.
Okay.
If you wanna eat into fund balance, you can do that. The council set a threshold of no less than 15%. But the state sets it no higher than 35%.
Yeah.
And we're about 27 after we made that transfer.
Yeah.
I don't know if the council approved that transfer or not. But when you're looking at property, sales tax, John's right. couple percent can make a lot of difference. And if you're hearing what the state's saying, if they're right or wrong, is they're saying they're anticipating very flat revenues. And here's the other problem we've got. North Ogden isn't growing very fast. You got cities like Vineyard and Saratoga Springs and Washington County. And it's eating into our percent of allocation from the state. We get two things, money to spend in our city, and then we get an allocation based upon population. And we're growing at about 1 or 2%, something like that. And these other cities are just exploding, so they're getting more sales tax allocated to them. So you got two things, headwinds, as you think about what you want to do with sales tax.
Yeah.
Because this year, once again, if I'm reading the report right, 4.8 million, 4.808 in fiscal 24. We budgeted 4.8 in 2025, and we're about 2% due to that big, I mean, it's primarily due to that 1 month, whatever that caused that. Right?
Yeah.
So, but if you're off, you've got the fund balance, which you can use to your point.
And another thing I mentioned, you know, I said, you know, the two that are coming online for property tax are not sales tax generating entities. And so if we knew that this is not coming, just if there was a Costco coming in, there's not a Costco coming in, there's not a Costco coming in. Then we would know that there'd be a significant bump in sales tax coming the year that they open doors. But they're not coming, and there's no sales tax generator coming on the horizon in this next fiscal
There
year.
might be minors, but.
Well, yeah, the minor, the quick service food, or the, what do they call it? Fast casual. They'll generate a little bit, but not enough that you'll see a significant increase. But the following years, we might see some, depending on what sort of mid-box or things come in down there. But again, some of those are a 12-month build, so they might pull the permit and it'll be a whole nother fiscal year before we even see the first sales tax dollar. So it's just part of the conversation. And each of you kind of needs to settle in on what your thoughts are, because 3 of you have to agree on the budget. I mean, it's better when everybody agrees, but 3 of you have to vote yes for the budget. And it's important to note that I don't think any of us want to be here really late in June on that meeting, because you have to pass it by that second meeting in June, or you cannot adjourn your meeting until you adopt an operating budget. So, anyways, I know I spent a lot of time talking with Councilman Pulver and the mayor. Blake and Ryan, do you have other thoughts?
I mean, I guess what we're saying, because the budget, so currently with the fiscal year 2026, we're budgeting 4.9, and at this point, we have a 3.16% increase.
Yeah, that would be, yeah, that's the difference between the 4.8 and the 4.9 is the 3.16.
So you're basing your budget on an increase there of 150,000,
Yeah,
and you're basing it on an increase in property tax growth of 200,000,
170, yeah.
which is about triple what we normally get. So in my opinion, not that it matters, you're getting pretty aggressive on revenue.
Why are we tripling it on property tax if we're used to only getting?
Because we're getting two commercial properties that are gonna be 100% tax versus what we had to pass with for $1.75, now they're gonna be.
So that's a
Well,
justifiable.
Does the RDA weigh into this, because that's no longer paying into the RDA, so now we're gonna get more
Ooh.
property
We got that
tax?
this year.
Yeah, that would have been,
That's in this year.
I thought it was last year we took it out.
Oh,
I'll find out about that.
yeah, remember we got that
I kind of, yeah.
surprise? It was really nice. But that's now included in last year's property tax, so it's growth upon that.
So what was our property tax in 24? If it was 2.9,
Well, we raised it 9.5%.
What did we get in 24, is that what you're saying? That's the budget. Do you have the actual? You should.
Let me go grab it out of the.
That's all right.
So while you're kind
But-
of,
Growth was, I think, what, 60, one year was 75,000, I think.
Final budget
One year
was
was
29, 3, yeah, well, he's got it. Yeah, that was what it was.
so that property tax, of 170,000, that's pretty justifiable.
I'm just making sure RDA, if we're
Well,
accounting for RDA this year, then that makes sense to me.
John said you had 120 houses built. And an average of $450 is what the city reports. That's $54,000 is growth. These buildings you've got, they're probably $2 million buildings. Taxed at 100%, that'd probably be maybe 2,500 piece, that's another 5,000. So you've got 59,000. If we got 129 homes, 120 homes, and you've got 2 commercial buildings. So that growth's about 3 times what we can identify, unless John's got something.
Yeah,
That'd be
Superstorm
sweet.
coming
So it,
See, here's the fact of the matter, you gotta hope that those revenue increases are there, because John's got a sheet that, when he shares that with you, if you're quite interested.
yeah, but
The
so,
only way it can be funded, if you don't increase property taxes, is to hope you get those revenues.
yeah, so it's a conversation that the council needs to be comfortable with is what's our sales tax number? Because, as the mayor alluded to, and I'm gonna skip, and mentally we're skipping ahead a little bit, but as we start looking at salaries, we are behind. And in some places significant. I've tried to spend a lot of time today to just look for reasons that I might be off, but
Hope you found some.
I found a few, yeah. But it's a little scary, and from a staff level, I wouldn't recommend using fund balance to fund an ongoing cost. You know, using fund balance to pay for a project or to buy a piece of capital equipment, that's kind of that 1-year expense. But if you're doing something that's an ongoing, then that's not good accounting in my mind. It also,
Include interest income, right?
yeah,
We talked about not using that as operating budget money,
right,
because we don't control interest rates. I mean, I think we can project them year by year pretty close, but when we start relying on getting a lot of interest income, that's probably not operational, that's not a fun projects, probably.
yeah. And that's, so anyways, there's some things coming down. I'll do the same thing I've done every year. My belief on property taxes, you do what I call maintaining the rate, which is you do a little bit every year. I think last year I recommended the 3 to 5%. And you went a little higher than I recommended, which is fine, but I think if you're just consistent, then residents expect it, and I hope that someday the state would allow the maintaining of the rate to not go through the property tax hearing, but they're not quite there yet. Wrong keyboard. Let's jump on to what Mayor was alluding to. Salary survey. So to do this survey, we use a database called TechNet, where not every city in Utah uses it, but probably half of them use it, and they input their salaries for specific job descriptions. And then we use what's called the actual average salary. So let's just take my position as the city manager / administrator. We look at all the cities that inject into the system, the high, the low, they get all mushed together, and we look at what people are actually getting paid, not the range. Because the ranges, in my opinion, are somewhat useless because no one actually follows them, meaning that 80% of the people are at the top of the range and 20% are at the bottom. And so I think it's important, it's healthier to look at what people are actually getting paid. We then take that and run it against how long our employees have been in their job. And we kind of have an earmark for how long it should take you to master a position. So a good example is the police officer 1. That might be a 4-year timeframe, meaning after 4 years, we expect them to be fully proficient as a police officer 1 and ready to move on to be a police officer 2. And so in that 4 years, they're going to go from the bottom of what we create our range, our goal, our initial range to our middle. We want them to grow to that middle number and then promote to a PO2, and then they reset back to the bottom of the range and grow again over the next 4 years. The hard thing about that is the range is always moving because cities are always changing their salaries. And so every 6 months I pull this number and try to get a feel for what's going on. You know, as we talked about, we'll only talk about it in council meetings on the annual basis moving forward, but I'll still try and provide the council with this information at the 6-month window, just via email or whatever, because it helps me get a temperature on what's happening in the area. Typically in the past few years, our increase has been in around the $260,000 range. As we look at all the positions, some move a lot, some move a little. That's about a 3% increase, and that's about historically what has happened. I don't want to, because I'm not, because I'm still doing some detailed work on the sheets to make sure that there's not something crazy out there. My worst fear is that number is double that. And currently in the budget that we have down that balances with all the revenue we've talked about, it anticipated $170,000 as an increase. So at the very least, we're talking about 90. At the very worst, we're talking about another 330,000. And we just don't have that kind of money laying around. But I will also say we also don't have the ability to ignore it and get behind again, because we've fought so hard to get close and to get where we got to. The reality is some positions have just, it's been insane. A good example, I hate to use an example because I don't want employees to get their hopes up, but there are jobs where every city started heavily recruiting for those positions because of federal rules and regs that were coming into play, and we needed more sophisticated people to do it. And other jobs where cities just started recognizing if they weren't hiring a top tier employee for that position, there was mistakes happening. And so my plan is with this council is to finalize this sheet and then send it to you all so you can see it. And then we're just going to have a tough conversation about it, because some of the people are great. You know, some people are right where they should be or a little above where they should be, and that's okay. But we have some employees who are, well, I fixed the worst one, but they're at, our typical range is between 90 and 100% or 110% of that average number. And we have some employees that are in the high 70s and low 80s. So they are below that, but some of that is because their job has moved so quick. You know, much like we saw with police over the past several years where the positions moved so fast. Some of those others have caught up to that. And my impression is that some of the employees in other cities were revolting because the police were getting a lot of special attention and they were saying, why not us too? And so councils responded. And some of those cities had the sales tax to support it. And likely if theirs are dropping, then they're going to be struggling. So anyways, that's not a great conversation or a fun conversation for us to have, but it's there, it's on the horizon, and it's something that needs to be addressed because, as I mentioned earlier, paying for salaries out of one-time money is not great policy. At the same time, losing people because they get better job offers at other places is not great policy either. You know, they range on what it costs to replace someone, but it's usually at least half of the salary. Some people say it's 100% of the salary. I know with the police officer, for example, it's a lot of training. And so they're tied up with their field training officer and their sergeant for 6 months to a year. And so there's just a lot of time that goes into training people. So it's a scary conversation. And in this meeting, we won't provide all the details because we don't want people's hopes to get up or their hopes to get dashed if they're not on that list. But we do have some people that are out of whack and we need to fix it. I should also mention in this, we also included the council in the discussion. That same TechNet has a system that compares you against other councils and boards. And it says you're all underpaid as well. So, by about $350 a month. I can share yours because, you're all in the room and you get to decide if your hopes get up or not. But that's one of those conversations that we'll have. And if the council would like to, we could have, I could meet with 2 council members and go through the whole sheet, the whole process and all the details to help you understand what we're doing. It's probably a 3-hour conversation would be my guess. So just sit right back and you'll hear the tale. Right? Anyway, so this is the scariest news I've seen in the budget process this year, is just how much the needle moved in the past 12 months. So questions, thoughts?
Is the cap still 20% or 10 for catch-up? That's what I had written down earlier. It's a question.
That's a good question.
Okay.
In our policy, that historically, with the exception of a few strategic where people got a new job description, hey, this is a new job title, so you get an increase. The annual has typically been capped at 10%. That doesn't jive as much with the conversation in January, where I think the comment was made, we're going to get everyone caught up. But it's just the reality. And the way my sheet is built, I can look at minimums and maximums and it spits out a number. But so at 10%, we do help a lot of people get closer. But we do have some people that are above that as far as needing an increase.
But on average, of course, this is defense sector. I don't know how much that compares to what city stuff is, but it's been about 3%. So when you said 3%, I'm like, oh, okay, that made sense, at least for this past year. So I don't know. But like you said, there's a lot of things that are going up. The problem is that I don't want to play catch up either, but at the same time, you gotta come up with that crazy revenue thing. Okay.
And
There's another-
list, and John is still refining it, but there was some, I think there was one as high as 30%. Building was 20%. And, that's what the council has to decide, is how they're gonna fund something like that. Because you can put whatever cap you want, but then it just grows on you. It just grows, but, John is refining the number, but it's probably the biggest number I've seen in the 5 years I've been here.
Yeah. And probably the smallest number of people who are where they're supposed to be. So there's a lot of people between that 0 and 10% number too.
Which is really interesting because, John's talking, that number's probably at least 6%, maybe 7%.
Mm-hmm.
And you hear the market numbers, state got 0 this year. I think, who was it? Anyway, about 3.4% is the average. And I know John's still refining the thing, but it's substantial.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's not police really that's pushing that high. There's some in there, but it's not necessarily police that's pushing that up. However, Weaver County, you should know, is waiting to get their salary report back. They surveyed every job in the county to find out what pay was, and they went, you know, a long distance away. So I would suspect their numbers will come back pretty dang high.
And that's what I was gonna mention. Just locally in Weaver County and Davis County, we've looked and we know of at least 5 cities that have done like major salary studies, so that could be an indication of why some of this has moved. Like Mayor said, you have Weaver County, Ogden City just finished up their big one. I think it was either Clearfield or Layton, one of them. So I mean, we have some major cities that were also doing some of that. And then there's the other part of it that it's kind of that weird situation where you're almost a year behind. So when you talk about 3%, we are adjusting our numbers, but the problem is, you know, if a city gives an increase, you know, we're showing that we're 3% behind. But if Ogden City goes and gives a 5% increase, well, then we're even more behind. And so it's almost like you're chasing your tail a little bit in that situation where
Study needs to also entail benefits. You know, because cities are now making the effort to get salaries comparable to the private enterprise, but benefits in public entities are they're probably double what's in the private sector. So I think, you know, we need to also look at benefits to see, you know, how competitive we are in that.
Total
And,
compensation.
you know, it's crazy, but, you know, that's what public entities have done. Because for so many years, they said, well, we'll just pay more benefits and we don't have to be competitive in the salary. So they just jacked up benefits. And now the benefits are really high, and now salaries are going up too. So I think you need to look at the whole situation.
And there is some helpful information, not as much on TechNet because I don't think it does a good job of capturing the benefits.
But we just did a study now. For instance, we found out that Pleasant View is willing to pay $4,000 more per employee
For healthcare.
for healthcare than North Ogden does.
Sure.
So, I mean, you gotta stay in the ballpark, right?
Yeah.
And I would tell you, council, my ask from you tonight on this topic is to think about it, but I also think it'd be helpful to indicate that you're not doing zero. We've already had at least one of our people trying to be poached by another city. And they're saying there's a rumor out there that we're not doing increases. And I don't think that's the case. That's not what's in the budget. But I just, you know, it'd be helpful that for the 3 of you or 4 of you who are in the room to indicate that we are looking at increases. It's not off the table. Because, you know, that other city said, oh, I heard there's zero, and I don't know where they got it from. So it wasn't for me. Chief didn't say it. Dave didn't say it.
I hate training new people, so there you go. You have to keep the people you have that you've invested in. Now, you know, what's the happy medium between, you know, feeding them 30% raise just to keep up with everybody else? We got to figure that out because it's just not doable for immediate jumping. And I mean, we might get behind, but I think at the same time, there's other key things that North Ogden brings that I think a lot of other cities don't. So I think that's it's Katie's job to do all that, to make sure. No, but honestly, I think it is a good city. I mean, that's one of the key things, and retention rate is important. So.
And I just rather mention that, you know, this year with what I've been doing with finance, Katie took the salary survey on with her and Victoria and have done a ton of work to get us to this point to where we even kind of have a good finger on, you know, to the wind on what's going on. And it's a beast, right, Katie? It's a, yeah. So, I think, you know, council, if you're okay, at least that it's on the table, I think that's important, because one thing I'm not sure that you all recognize is that we've got quite a few employees. I mean, this is their second home, and they watch council meetings on Tuesday nights while they're at home doing other stuff, you know, working in the shop, and they know what's going on and what you're saying. And so I think it's helpful to, Dave always gets a lot of questions the next morning on, from his troops, and I think that the police do as well, because they care. I mean, they spend more time here than they do at home, if you exclude sleeping, and they care, so. You know, just keep that in mind as we move forward. And then I think our next topic is the fun one. And I mean that really, we're gonna talk about the 5-year capital projects. And then we'll come back to this slideshow for a final conversation, but let me go grab the the capital project sheet. So council, you have seen this before.
John, will you go to the finance, or go to the admin drive and pull it, because I saved. I
Oh,
didn't
you saved it on the admin drive?
Yeah. So it's in the 25-26 budget.
There, or this one?
Yep.
Okay, let me make sure I share this so the people online can see. All right.
Yep.
Okay,
We'll start with the CIP. Let's just go.
can you all read that okay? So as a reminder, this sheet shows 6 years and has an estimate of what we think these projects are gonna cost. And we'll start, as Dave mentioned, with general fund, and he will walk us through this because he is the one who knows all this stuff.
So you guys can see, part of this project or process was that we were gonna start doing playgrounds, and that we were gonna spread those playgrounds out over all these years, and so you can see that that's exactly what we did there. Some of the things that are in our current budget right now is the track maintenance, which will be so yeah, the track, sorry, the track stuff is on this current year, right? Those are some of the ones that it's out to bid right now. That will be being complete here in the next couple months. That 240 was fences, backstops, bathroom remodel or rehabs, field stuff, all of that kind of stuff was in that. And so for this year that we're asking about is we wanted to do some parking lot maintenance focus. So that 125 that you can see there will be Barker Park, Mountain View Park, and Oak Lawn will fit inside that 125. So we'll be able to rehab all 3 of those parking lots. That's rehabbing the asphalt as well as the striping. And then the other thing is doing Mountain View's playground. So that is what is coming out of parks. If you go down a little bit, Joan. So the 3 million in there is for phase 2 of Washington Boulevard. Some of it will be in this coming up budget year, and some of it will be in the following year. But it'll all make up that 3 million.
Where is the right turn lane?
Yes.
That's in our current budget year. And I think we did it with,
Where is it?
we didn't have it in the 5-year plan before, so we didn't put it on the sheet.
Isn't it this one, 115 right here, Dave?
That's part of I think that was part of the
Oh, that's the
study.
design.
Yeah,
But that's gone out to bid. UDOT approved our project.
Well, I know, I was just wondering where it is on the. I don't think it's part of the 5-year.
it was never a part of the 5-year plan because it was kind of one of those things that got put on after the
Yeah,
fact.
but the council voted to fund it, right?
Mhm. Yeah,
Just wanna make sure that.
so it is in the CIP in our current budget year now. But it just never got put onto the 5-year plan because of that. It's because of the way it worked out.
And then
The-
this sheet, councils, it also shows the funding sources. So it's showing some, money coming in, like, use of impact or transportation impact fees and things like that to help pay for some of those projects. And then the very bottom number shows how that capital fund project balance goes up and down. understanding that there's $1 million here taken out, and that's the $1 million that's kind of the cushion in the capital improvement fund. So,
So for the 2 million is still sitting out there for the community park or pond thing that's for the reservoir move, right? Or the detention pond move?
correct.
Yes.
So that's not being done, period, right?
Well, it's
For
not-
right now, I mean,
Yeah,
this
so-
year.
which it'll move from 25 to
Okay.
26.
Then you've got the sale of the property that would offset a good portion of that, right?
Correct.
I didn't see that in there either, but.
And then will you go right back up to all the way up?
Sale,
Mhm.
sell the property.
The detention pond, no, I didn't see it.
Say what?
Is that what you're saying this was done?
Yeah, well, we got the $2 million
Mm-hmm.
for the park, but we don't have the 3 million that's coming in, or is that
Right.
over and above the 3 million?
I think, I
Was it
think that
water?
should be coming in as a storm asset, or. Yeah, so it should be on this sheet, and it's not on here as a revenue. Cause it's a stormwater
And
asset.
that might be the amount over and above, because we talked about, even though the storm's coming in, John, that a lot of that would be stormwater availability, right?
Correct.
Other than the park itself, but the basin and a lot of the things that would be required would come out of the sale of the property. That. my memory
Yeah, the
serves me right.
stormwater improvements would come out and sell the property. Yep.
Then we still have the 750,000 from RAM. Getting out there.
And the only thing else I was gonna point out is, to Mayor's point earlier, we talked about Barker Park. If you look on here, go up, John. Right, as of right now, we have it on the list. We don't have any money. And so that's exactly kind of where Mayor was saying that we don't put a plan together and start putting it on this 5-year plan so that we can start putting money away to start putting towards the park.
This includes the 300,000, basically that's budgeted every year, cover 5-year projects, isn't it, John?
Yeah,
Revenues are in there.
it shows up down, as a revenue here.
Uh,
This 300,000 is the general fund transferring money into capital improvements.
And so if you don't do that, that balance just dissipates, right?
Correct.
Yeah. And
So that is part of the budget each year.
And Dave and I were talking about that if, to start putting that plan together, that there's enough money in the fund balance that we could spend some money on Barker Park this year to get the fully engineered plans and everything dialed in. So that, because once we have things dialed in, then we can get the site plan approved by the planning commission, and then you could start actually constructing things in 27, 28, 29, 30. As impact fee revenues come in and as the council decides to start moving that direction.
And kind of where CIP is at right now, I think we looked at it and I think we felt comfortable, like, it was like 200,000, right? That we felt that we could put in there for this year. But we wanted to talk to you guys because we hadn't put it on the 5-year plan, but putting 200 in there, putting it towards the design, those kind of things, and then whatever's money is left over from the design. Maybe that's what we focus on the trails, like either going into Chicken Coop or whatever. But putting that money so that we are starting to go in the right direction with Barker
Agreed.
Park.
I think that must, at least at this point, if we're I don't know if that was one of the things, the city center, and if we're picking Barker Park, which, maybe we should, it's more dynamic, you do more stuff in it, then you gotta start focusing on it, or we're gonna be not hampered, but dialed into North Ogden Park, so.
I think, that the council needs to look at setting a planned use of the impact fee. John has projected out what impact fees could be if these projects come about. And you know, you gotta maybe think about assigning a specific use to that, which could be development of Barker Park.
Well,
There's a lot of, Kevin knows this, but, you know, when I look at the ramp, thing, there's a lot of money, given for legitimate nice park. I've seen upwards of $1 million, I think, or 750 to $1 million. So if the city decided they wanted to put $1 million and could seek a match from RAM, and then maybe get some contributions, I think. How much money is Grant raised? Crickets, okay. That means zero, right? Most likely,
I think if you're very thin, you would have called me, but.
okay. But that would allow you a couple $1 million, and you could probably do phase one, which would be the island, to some degree.
That's phase two. Yeah, I understand. what you're saying. The
Whatever,
next phase, yeah, whatever.
You know, phase one was a chicken coop, but you're not gonna spend $2 million.
But it's Yeah, but at the same time, in parallel, we need to be planning and cost of maintaining that. And that's the other thing that I don't know, Dave, somebody was talking about it when we walked the trail one time, is that this is gonna, I don't know if it's double, but it was significantly increase the parks department because of all the things that they would need to do.
You gotta maintain what you build.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that goes to the point of that, you know, the ask probably for Dave and myself is to spend some money to design Barker Park in this next fiscal year. And really focus on, are there things we can do that would reduce maintenance? Because if we could design an area, I know that one of the plans and one of the concepts, you know, that we weren't at that level yet, but as you're looking at landscaping, if you do a buffalo grass that gets knocked down once or twice a year as opposed to weekly in some areas, that might make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But I think we'd probably be hiring an engineer to do some of the underground work, and then we'd probably be looking at hiring a more sophisticated landscape architect to help us in designing some of these things so they could be low maintenance.
And we wanna keep it as natural.
Yeah.
As possible, but yet we wanna not have it so natural that nobody uses it for anything, right?
Yeah.
So you gotta find that happy medium.
So that had been kind of what Dave and I had
It's
talked
natural
about.
having lots of dyers too.
Was
Color, beautiful, yeah.
was putting in,
Fought that so hard.
you know, about $200,000 for planning and engineering fees, or not planning fees, but you know, you know what I mean, landscape and engineering design.
John, can I ask, what are we doing, new bathroom at McGriff? Is that just for vandalism or just replacing?
It's just replacing that thing, so it's like, almost 50 years old.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, if you've been in there, you don't.
yeah,
And to do the type of building that's resistant to vandalism
It's not.
and attractive, it's not cheap.
But the requirements for, we were talking about that too, the requirements for a public restroom is off the chart.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's stupid, but
So we ready to go into
Yeah,
water,
I think
Dave?
we can move on. So you can see water, really, we've already started on 1,700. Some of that money's being used in the current year, but we put the whole total in the year that we're gonna finish, and so that's why there's the 1.7 there on 1,700. PRVs, you can see that number's high. The reason for that is that there is 2 developments that have been approved in our city this year that both require to put a PRV in. The way that we do it now, because we're doing the new EFI nicer PRVs, is we cover half the cost of that PRV and the developer covers half the cost of that PRV, instead of doing the old concrete, not safe for our employees, those kind of things. And so that's where you see that increase in there, is because 2 of them are gonna be done with development. And then we're just asking for or doing one like we've been doing for the last several years.
Which is an upgrade of an existing one to a safer one.
Correct.
And Dave, I don't wanna get ahead of ourselves, but is this broken out between impact fee qualification and
Yes.
are we? How much of it's impact fee? I mean, we've got the collection of impact fees. How much of it is impact fee
eligible.
eligible?
So those PRVs will be, and then, um, and then the water line on 1700, there's a portion of that because we went from 8-inch up to 12-inch in a lot of cases, or so the difference between that 8-inch and the 12-inch is all impact fee eligible.
Do we have what our impact balance is right now, impact fees?
we don't have the balance here.
Because in addition to the collection, we can utilize what we've got, right?
Correct.
For some of these projects. I just wanted to
Anything,
separate them out so we don't end up increasing water fees more than is necessary. What can, if we break those out between impact fee eligible?
so a good example is, a zone 1 well project, there's gonna be some impact fee components. Or sorry, I'm looking at these, like the canyon well.
Zone 1 well too.
And so, yeah.
I know you don't have but I'm just saying it might be a good idea to break it out for the council.
Okay.
So they can see, because what's not covered by impact fees aren't impact fee eligible. It's taken into consideration what water rates are, right?
Yeah.
Yes,
Is that-
absolutely.
Can we get this file or?
Yes. And then the other one, that's a state mandate that we're seeing a lot more, that we have to justify where our water, when we are producing water, where it's being used at and those kind of things. We've never had, not never. In some places we have outlet metering stations. And there was certain places that we never had outlet. So what we were doing is measuring the water coming into the reservoir, but it was never getting measured on the way out of the reservoir. And so there was some stuff from the state that's came down that said, hey, you need to start doing your outlet metering. A big part of that, to give you an idea of where there's like a weird off, Rice Creek's a perfect example. In the spring, when we're producing, 1,800 gallons a minute, overnight, we'll pull it into the reservoir, so it shows that we're bringing that water in. Well, that reservoir will start overflowing, right? Because we're bringing in so much water in the middle of the night, nobody's using water, so it'll actually go out the overflow. Well, we weren't being able to capture that water usage that was going down the creek. And so it was actually coming against us, saying that we were not accounting for the amount of water that we should be. Well, now if we have an outlet metering station there, we'll be able to show that water that actually goes back into our system. We can bring that number way back down and show to the state that we are being accountable for the water that we're using. So.
And then the big project that's on the horizon is meter change out. And we'll talk about that as we get closer to it. In a couple of years, but just so you know, meters wear out about every 15 years and they all have to be replaced, and currently they're $300 a pop.
Yep, a little over.
Some of them were out like overnight.
Yeah.
Yes, they do. So, and we are doing a lot of work in with the meter stuff and trying to do some financing, different things to keep costs down in the water department. So, sewer, always pretty straightforward, right? You got the lining projects between 400 and 450,000 a year, manhole repairs and those kind of things. So this one's pretty consistent. The one big thing that we can talk about is we had placed the sewer truck in 29 because that was at the 5-year when we started that thing. Because of us being able to do that SL-RAT and those kind of things that we had talked about over the last few years, we're able to make that sewer truck. It's still in wonderful shape because we don't have to use it as much because of the sound equipment that we use with the SL-RAT. That will, as we get closer to that 29, or I think we're gonna be able to move that sewer truck farther down into 31 or 32. So
You could call Camille out there too, because I believe they've had some prizes with environmental stuff, and the annual rate increase that they're gonna be charging us on sewer, I think it's 10%.
that's what I heard. We heard that it was gonna be
A
about
number of
10%.
years.
So
Maybe we'd need an outlet meter from North Ogden to Geneva. Sorry.
Streets. So streets, we have in this budget year right now, we have the messaging or message board. We have one, we still rent one quite a bit because typically we're trying to put it in a couple different places in the city. So we've done that because it's just at this point, I mean, we're renting anywhere from $8,000 to $10,000 in rental fees a year with as much time as we rent one. And so we just said, I think it's time to get a second one. We think we'll be able to do a lot there. The striping machine, that is just for smaller jobs, things that we're curb painting, parking lot repairs, those kind of things that, striping has got very expensive over the last few years, like talking anywhere from 30 to 40% increases on striping. So we think we can do some of our smaller projects where it costs a lot of money just to get them out here to do that. We can handle those things ourselves. And so that's why we have put in for that one. The pedestrian crosswalk, we just received a grant for that. And so we'll be able to put that pedestrian crosswalk in. Those are those big peds like you would see down at Walmart, the big ones that'll cross Washington. So we'll either put that one at 1900 by Big O or up at 2650 up here. Which also could eliminate a crossing guard there too at that point if we did something like that. So we got to sit down with Chief and the streets and Eric, our engineer, and just kind of work out where we're gonna place that.
Just a thought back on that other one was, we're not gonna have both Fruitland in work and then Washington expansion in work at the same time, right?
No, so we got a grant for Fruitland Drive. I don't know why I put in 28 and 29 anyways. And it was more than that anyways. So we just got approved for a grant, through
WFRC,
thank you. And it was 2 million, 3 million, 3 million for the intersection at 2100 and Fruitland. So.
We do a roundabout then?
You're ruining my intersection.
Yes, I'm sorry. So we'll be
That was
able
to annoy
to
the mayor, but anyway.
do some of those, but yeah.
Yeah, cause I was just thinking, I'm like, are we gonna get north-south? Yeah, anyway. Build Monroe out right past John's house.
What are those grants, built into the fund balance then, John?
that grant hasn't been built into it yet. So we need to do the grant with the full project cost.
It looks like in pretty good shape going forward fund balance wise, huh?
Yes,
Yeah, I mean, one of the big things is that we still have this much sitting in here from,
Transportation. So,
yeah, so.
but if you've got a
Actually working on
100,000 grant and a $3 million grant, makes a lot of difference.
go. It's gonna help us.
Good work on the grant, by the way.
That's Eric.
Yeah, Eric took the lead on that
He
one.
did. Step up on that. Storm. The biggest one is just the lining project. That's gonna be done at Orton Park. Those pipes are leaking, so every time that we fill that pond whatsoever, we are having problems sharing that water with all the neighbors there on the north side of the park there. And so this is just something that we've got to get figured out, and the cheapest and best option is lining. But the problem is it's a big pipe. It's a big 18-inch storm drain pipe. And so that's why there's that cost to it. But
So if I have a question, somebody said never asked a question you'll have the answer to, but you know, we're spending all this money on stormwater to stop water from flowing out way. But are they, since we're doing all the work up here primarily, why aren't they making any contribution to this? If it's basically to say, I mean, we wanna be part of a larger community, but it would seem like that if we're doing all the work and paying for it, the benefit downstream, is the county or the city? How does that work?
So I'll tell you my impression from a tense conversation I had with a stormwater engineer 10 years ago. We are reducing our flow by the use of the detention basins to our historic level. So when you add all the extra asphalt and everything, it causes an increase in the concentration of flow to those points, those channels that head west. And so by building the basins, we restrict it down to a size that sticks with what it would have been in a 10-year storm or a 100-year storm. And so we're still sending water that way, just in the way it used to go before we added all the asphalt. And so the argument is from them is they're still taking our baseline flow and we're holding the peak flow until it can go out with the baseline.
So they're planning for no growth whatsoever.
Well, no, they're doing the same thing out there, where because of all their asphalt, they're seeing an increase in that peak flow.
But where's our taxpayer money going on that side? It should be going to planning for future growth, because we're not stagnant in, anyway, sorry.
Does that build into our impact fees then, the fact that we have to retain all this?
Yeah, so that's part of that stormwater impact fee that we just increased last week or 2 weeks ago.
It seems like it's a lot of,
Yeah, in theory, the reason they're not participating is that we get our water down to the level of what it historically used to be. Because that's the expectation from the state and the feds, is that we hold our water to that historic flow level until it's that 500-year storm, and then everything just floods.
So,
And
but then when we double our population and double our, so we have retention ponds everywhere, I mean.
so we do have an increase in the number of detention ponds. Monroe, for example, in that impact fee study from last week, I think included
Right, yeah.
another like 15 acre feet of storage as you came down at just for.
then if, that hills develop, that's soaking in a lot of water right now.
Yes.
We put a lot of
Right.
concrete and.
And that's that's
Asphalt.
one part of the, like, when we do a pre-con, they have to show us how they're keeping the historic water that's on that site. And so that's why you see every subdivision you see comes with a detention basin.
Awesome.
So
Yeah.
you were talking about a community pond. What was, you were lining something, Orton Park, what was?
That's the pond park, also known as the pond park.
Say the part?
No.
Moving the basin and turning it into a park, that's the community pond.
But you were
I
saying,
thought you were talking about something about Orton Park.
no, but at Orton Park, there's 5 or 6 homes that are right there
Mhm.
along Orton Park. Because that pipe is an old concrete pipe, 50-year-old concrete pipe, it leaks.
Oh, you're gonna line the pipe.
We're gonna line that pipe.
Okay.
It's just like a sewer, it's just a bigger pipe.
Line a pond.
No.
Yeah, the pond,
It's inside the pond.
Yes, got it.
Sorry.
this is the number that was originally planned for the community pond because the federal grant covered 100% of the storm. And these would be for the upgrades that we needed that the feds wouldn't cover. So.
No, got it.
We got Fleet.
And then Fleet, sorry. Fleet is. Obviously, public safety, we're staying on the same program that we're on, 4 vehicles. 2 patrol, 1 CSO and 1 unmarked. Right, chief?
Yes.
Right now in the budget, we have a snowplow truck. We typically try to do that every other year, so that's kind of where we're at. Then this is some of the lease payments, and when I say lease, our financing payments. So that's the financing payment there. The track hoe, that is for a new track hoe. That is not only coming out of the general fund, most of that money is coming from all the utility funds but it gets hosted in Fleet because it's the easiest way to move that money because we just have our motor pool allocation. So each department, all the enterprise funds pay their allocation and it gets hosted here.
So is there a way to have the net? I mean, not on the spreadsheet, but when you do a presentation to say, hey, this year we're new snowplow, 400 grand. It always, it's an impact, but visual impact. But if you say through depreciation, we've saved up this much and blah, blah, is there a way to come at the end to say, and it's gonna be net 20 grand? I don't know. As opposed to just seeing this ginormous thing. And I know spreadsheets are different. You put the revenues at the bottom and you're tracking depreciation, yada, yada.
Yeah.
But in a presentation, I don't know. That's just a thought for that because it always, I mean, we kind of talked at budget committee too, is that to see a ginormous number without seeing the reverse side of the grant or whatever you have
Yeah.
transfer from all the other places to say, what is the actual impact to our budget year?
Yeah.
I have no idea,
Okay.
So, but, cause I know
And
each
that,
department,
the fleet
Yeah.
truck program's a perfect example of that,
Yeah.
right? It's a net zero.
right.
But on here, we have to show that
80 grand.
it's 80 grand that we're spending, right?
That Traco's not one of those big Tracos, it's just one of the smaller units,
It's a medium sized one.
so not a backhoe,
It's a Traco.
Traco.
Yeah. it'll be
Like a
called
mini
that.
X, is that what you're talking about?
Mhm.
Yeah, it's bigger than a mini X.
Yeah.
But it's that, it
It's
looks
the
like. a
same
mini
thing.
X.
It looks like-
Medium X.
Yeah.
And that's the price on Tracos?
Business.
My first thought was a big, and I'm thinking, why do we need a big one? So,
Why not?
why not?
Bigger go home, is that?
Is that? So
Um,
what is the lift truck? That was.
That was last year's.
That was 2025, right?
Yeah, so
Well,
we're
that's-
in this column, the 26 column.
What's replacement door parts for 60,000?
That's at the shop that we're at now. We just replacing either doors, rollers, cameras. They're very expensive and we have, what, 30 doors over there?
A lot of doors, the big roll-up doors, so garage doors.
Our big garage doors over at the shop that we're at
They
now.
need to be replaced.
A lot of, like, a majority of them have to have some kind of maintenance on them. And I have the whole breakdown for that if you'd like. Then the skid steer and the backhoe, we show it on here just to give you guys an indication, but it's just the lease. Those are the lease prices for those.
And then that number you were talking about, Chris, is right here.
Mhm.
This injection of the 922 is coming in from other funds to fund some of the stuff
True,
above.
but it doesn't
Right.
allocate from depreciation what you've actually
Right.
saved. I put that in air quotes because
Yeah.
I know because I asked Jamie the first day, where does the depreciation money go? It goes in the general fund. And to me, I would love to see the allocation for it. Hey, these depreciated assets for yada, yada, yada. What's the actual? Should be tracking that, I would think, but I don't know.
We have a
If you
depreciation
look at the
schedule.
general fund thing, depreciation on general fund assets only occurs at some big combined thing at the end.
Right, it's not.
It's like this hidden number, but in the enterprise funds, it's just part of operations.
Right.
We've had a discussion about not spending all of our depreciation every year.
We did.
Yep.
Any questions on any of those? I know that was a lot and there's tons of stuff going on.
Do I have the 1,000-yard stare yet?
The what?
1,000-yard stare, you haven't heard that?
No.
Really? No, all right. Guess it's a military thing.
I've heard it.
Have you? Okay, good. Basically, usually in sports you do that too. You're in the zone and so coach is like looking at you, you're like right through them. Just like, let me go back out.
Oh, started all the way back. Oh, dang it. I didn't do the share.
Gonna make Susan sick with all the shuffling.
So council, just one final sheet that kind of to talk about this budget process. And just conceptually, so I've had
Painted shed.
So, again, these are the council priorities. You know, public safety, community unity, employee and economic growth. Some of those, it is easy to tie a budget number to, others it's not. And so just as you're thinking about the budget, think about the council priorities that were set in October. And are we funding those to the level that we want to? Economic growth is one of those that's, I think the only request for economic growth that I could, put a thing to, with the exception of maybe some of Scott's salary, would be that software he asked for. I know Dave and I and the chief have already talked about some things we could use it for besides just economic growth, because you essentially have unlimited use of that software. But just, think about those priorities. And obviously they're in the order of the way they were categorized up here, A, B, C, D, meaning that economic growth is not expected to get as much money as public safety. But it's still a priority for the city. And then the picture up here, the sheds, I was talking at one of our city manager meetings about some of this stuff, and I won't tell you which city he worked for, but we were talking about councils and how we can make council meetings more effective. And his idea was, he called it the painted shed. So he said what he would do is come into a staff or into a council meeting and say, this is everything we're going to do. It's exciting. We're spending all this money. We're doing all these things. What color would you like it? And he used the color of the shed as a way to get the council feeling like they were involved on something that in reality didn't matter. And from my perspective, I don't want us to play that game. I don't want the council meetings to feel like we're giving you little tidbits of things you can decide so you feel important, as opposed to talking about the important things. And so with that, and the mayor, I didn't tell him I was doing this, but one of the goals we've been talking about is making sure that the council's focused on the important stuff in council meetings, and the other stuff we try and let it slide to the side. A good example of that is, historically, code enforcement has just been handled. And it's now reached a point where it needs some policy discussion and some policy shifting, and we're going to be talking about it next week. But that's something that most times of the year, it's a painted shed discussion about, should we worry about this person's grass or this person's non-running vehicle? But it's packaged as a general policy discussion for the council to consider, because we're talking about two different paths forward. We're talking about proactive enforcement and which rules we should enforce and which rules we should take off the books, to the mayor's point in most things. But I just really want to, and I just put these three kind of summaries. There's probably more things up there, but the council's the one that holds the purse, which means you decide all the money things, and you establish the policies and the goals, but you don't need to get involved in the colors. Because, when we're talking about stormwater, we have experts in stormwater who know what they're doing and can do it. And in your liaison role, it's also a little weird, because in your liaison role, you get a little more involved in the colors, but it's good to trust Dave Smith on stormwater because he knows what he's doing. So, I just wanted to have that as a little reminder, because with the budget especially, it's so easy to go into the line by line issues and spend all your time there, because it's very understandable. You deal with it every day in your lives. But what we really need is the council to talk about these high level policy things. And then the mayor, myself and Dave and the department heads, we can find a way to make the budget work with the amount of revenue and the amount of expenses that the council expects, and the goal in mind. On my way down to St. George last week for a conference I was at, I listened to that book, It's Your Ship, which I'm sure many of you have listened to, and I kind of took it as this approach of this this leadership where you're the top person and you're telling everyone. And if you really think about his book, he's really a middle manager. He kind of says it at the beginning, but it just keeps kind of coming back to, he's the captain of a ship, but he's got a commodore and an admiral, and he's got a, secretary of defense and all these people above him. And his job is to accomplish the goal and the task he's been assigned. And I think that that's something that the Dave, myself, the department heads, we can accomplish the goals you set for us if you set them. And if there's no goals, then we'll keep doing what we think is best. So that's just my spiel on how we can just keep ourselves centered as we go into this budget process is talk about the policies. And if you see something that's out of whack, right? The question about the doors, hey, Dave, help me understand the door parts. Like we will answer those questions, but it's not worth 45-minute discussion because Ty knows more about the doors than anybody else, and Ty's not in the room. In fact, Ty gave Dave the list, I'm assuming.
100%.
So
That was the importance of making sure you've got the right people in the right seats.
Right.
And that becomes administration's job. Once you get the right people in the right seats, let them do their job, right? Within the boundaries that are set. But the first thing you gotta do is make sure you got the right people in the right job. Or as Colin said, sit on the right bus in the right seat. Something like that.
and so if you
Then let them do their job.
and sometimes, and it's a reaction of public staff to bring the colors to the council a lot, because if we didn't make the decision, then no one can hold us accountable, right? And there's so many times that things up on Facebook that we don't want to have any ownership is. But I think that as we build that trust and the council and staff work together closer and closer, I think that you'll find that it'll make everyone's life easier and your meetings will become more efficient because you'll be talking, your long conversations will be about the really important stuff and not so much about, what color we paint the shed that Dave's building. He's not building a shed, but I just, when that city manager told me that, I was like, oh, that's a great idea. Because then they feel involved, but then the more I thought about it, it feels so disingenuous. What'd you say?
I said, I may know the city manager that told you that.
No, it was not South Ogden.
Did I say that?
Oh, maybe I just assumed that's what you thought. No, it was, I don't even think it was someone from Weaver County. I'm terrible at names. I'm not sure I know what city he's from. I know what he looks like though. So.
And still, and John knows I'm big on this, is we have to continue to instill business practices in government. I mean, I don't want to be Donald Trump by any means, right? But that's kind of what he says he's trying to do. It's just, he's got a chainsaw that he's using, right? But at some point in time, business principles have to be more instilled in government. I'm not saying we don't, but I'm just telling you, there's a huge difference, and it's gotta be narrow.
Yeah. That's everything I have on the budget. So.
Good job.
Good job.
Thanks, John. Anything else, Mr. Call, on that?
Nope.
All right, we'll move on to item number 5 then, with our public comments. So anyone here would like to make a public comment, feel free to do so under the rules of public comments. And John, if you would also watch online, anyone who would like to comment. So we'll enter into that now.
Philip Swanson, North Ogden resident. My only thought on Cherry Days with the parade. I know that one of the safety issues that we've talked about many years is the weak arms throwing candy along Washington Boulevard, and you can't get it out to the edges, and that brings kids in. What if we took the southbound lane and we put barricades down that lane and kept the parade in the northbound lane only, and allowed the crowd to come in once the road is closed, allowed the crowd to fill the southbound lane and have all the floats, all the candy, everything going on just one lane, rather than trying to split it across and having it'll narrow things a little bit, maybe make it a little bit safer, certainly make it easier to throw candy out. to the crowds, but that was the only thought I had. Good meeting tonight. Thanks.
You do have one online.
Susan Kilborn, North Ogden resident. Want to talk to you about Cherry Days. First of all, how you came upon the decision to pick between the two proposed sites. I asked when you first started talking about Cherry Days that you take into consideration what the people of North Ogden would like. Cherry Days has always been, I'm old, has always been about the people of North Ogden. I asked for a flash vote. Did anybody follow up on that? No. I'm going to say some rhetorical questions. I don't expect answers. So that's one thing. Second of all, you held a meeting where you were all present and you voted to have it on 3100 North. Then you did a 180 and all of a sudden it's now on Washington Boulevard. I want to talk about not just how the merchants along Washington Boulevard feel about their parking lots filling up with people going to the parade and none of their wares are being sold. I'm going to talk about the safety of something that's really important to me and should be to you, and that's the children. I've been involved with the children's parade, and I've been a volunteer for Cherry Days for a long time. That has ended. And the reason why is because you are putting the children back on Washington Boulevard. None of you have walked that route. None of you have been involved in the children's parade. You have not seen the debacle it was when it's held on Washington as compared to when it was on 3100. You talk about flyovers, you talk about how easy it is to block off this street or that street. You don't listen to the people who consistently come online and offer ideas. John Call, I'm calling you out. You mentioned that you would like to think of or get ideas on things for the kids to do at the carnival. I said, and it should be in the record, that I had all kinds of ideas for things to do for kids at the carnival because I used to do that for kids when my son was in school. Did you follow up with me? No. I'm talking to every one of you council members right now. You are consistently alienating the few people who show up here and have ideas because we all feel you don't care. That should be your priority. Your constituents should be your priority. So I'm just saying, Phil, I appreciate what you said about the candy because I was going to bring that issue up as well. I am saying that you need to look out for the children because everybody who is involved with the children's parade, I have heard from tonight, none of us will be involved. That's all I have to say. And that's all I have to say, guys. I can't tell you how badly I feel. And I am not saying sour grapes. I am telling you, you are ignoring something very important, and that's us.
Okay, thank you, Susan. Anyone else have, any comments this evening? All right, thank you for, your participation. Staff, any comments?
Nope.
Okay, you left. All right,
No comment.
John, Dave. Keith. Council? Any comments? None? I have none. I'll be looking for a motion to adjourn.